Okay, welcome back for the second of two Zoom recordings that will basically be over the course and course syllabus, and we'll also talk in this presentation about Blackboard and some of the different things that you've got available for you in Blackboard. So let me share my screen and have us go back for a moment and pick up where we left off with regard to the syllabus. What you should have in front of you now is the lecture schedule. Keep in mind that the lecture will be Zoomed on Wednesdays from 1:15 to 2:30. But on Monday, we will not be Zooming. You will be using that regular time to study your lecture material, the chapters we've gone over, or perhaps looking at some of the stuff upcoming in lab. So that is basically your time to use as you see fit. We will be again meeting on Wednesdays for lecture via Zoom, and I'll show you the Zoom link on the Blackboard course shell in a few minutes. Okay. Notice in red, as I've indicated in the earlier talk, that we will not be doing Blackboard quizzes for lecture or Blackboard lecture exams. We will be doing hard copy lecture quizzes and hard copy lecture exams during lab time. So what you have in front of you are the various weeks. I've given you a list of the lecture quiz dates. Okay, so this again is lecture quizzes that we're giving in lab. The topics that we're covering each week and the corresponding chapters in the textbook, in the Hole's Human Anatomy and Physiology textbook. So you can tell what chapter or chapters we are covering week by week. So if you would like to look ahead, read ahead, you certainly can do that. I am going to adhere to this schedule as best I can. So as you can tell, we're covering anywhere from 1 to as many as 1.5 chapters per week. So we're moving along at a brisk clip. So I will again underscore the importance of putting adequate time and study so you do not fall behind with the material. In addition to the lecture quiz dates, I've also listed here when the chemistry exam is going to be given in lab. That's going to be on Thursday, September 9th, or 10th rather. And then on week 4, we've got our first exam scheduled for Thursday, September 17th. And that first exam is going to basically cover chapters 1, 3, and 4. We'll talk more about that as we get closer, but basically that's sort of how the exam material works. The second lecture exam, over a month away on October 22nd, a Thursday, we'll be taking that during lab. That will basically cover chapters 5, 6, 7, and perhaps part of 8. We'll talk about that as we get closer. In other words, chapter 1, 3, and 4 will not be on exam 2 because we've already been tested on that in exam 1. And then about a month or so later, exam 3 scheduled for December 3rd. That's going to pick up where we left off. So perhaps part of 8, 9, 19, 14. You do not need to go back and look at chapter 5, 6, 1, or 3 for exam 3. So the material does not accumulate. The same goes for the quizzes. The quizzes will simply be over the material that we cover in class, not any lab stuff. And that material does not accumulate either. Okay, so you will want to be aware of the lecture quiz dates being given in lab. You will also want to be aware of when the lecture exams are scheduled, timing, as well as this chemistry test. And then finally, the fourth exam we will take on the 17th at a time that we will announce. As we get closer to the end of the semester, we'll nail down a time for that fourth exam. But that will be given in person, hard copy exam on the 17th. So that's basically the lecture schedule. And then we come to the lab schedule. And again, you are either in the Thursday morning lab section, 10 to 12:45, or in the Thursday afternoon lab section, 2:40 to 5:25. Here are the dates of those Thursdays, starting with this coming Thursday, the 27th. During that lab, we will cover exercise 1 and exercise 2 in the lab manual. So don't confuse the textbook with the lab manual. They're two separate entities. And we'll be covering these two topics. Now, you might remember from the earlier Zoom recording that I did that I told you there was going to be a formal typewritten lab report. Well, that is going to basically be over exercise 1 here. So when we go into Blackboard, which we will do in a few moments, and I'll show you where this material for lab is located, there will be a document there that you should print off and bring to class this Thursday. In fact, there's several documents related to exercises 1 and 2 and the lab report and how to do the write-up. Okay, so all of those handouts are in Blackboard. Now, not every single lab exercise, as you see listed below here, is going to have something for you to go and retrieve from Blackboard. It depends upon the exercise. Maybe there is, maybe there's not. But you'll see the listing in just a few minutes. But don't assume you got to bring something every single week. But many weeks there will be a handout or two to photocopy and bring with you to lab. Remember, I'm not providing those for you. You need to bring them. If you don't bring them, you're out of luck. So my suggestion is print all this stuff out for lab. Get a small little binder. Put it all in the binder. Print it all off at once and bring the binder with you each week. That's the best way to do it. Okay. So what we've got here again, topic listing, corresponding lab exercise, and the date, the Thursday. We've already mentioned that we've got some lecture quizzes and lecture exams we're giving during lab. And I have outlined all of those in yellow. So you can tell what lecture stuff, if you will, quizzes, exams, you're doing any particular Thursday by just looking at the yellow highlighted parts. The lab quizzes and lab practicals are highlighted in green. I've actually noted this here at the bottom. So let's talk about lab quizzes. We have our first lab quiz. On the same day, we have our first lecture quiz. We'll take the lab quiz first. And that particular lab quiz, indicated by the red asterisk, highlighted in green, is going to basically cover what we did the preceding week in lab, which would be exercises 1 and 2. Any exercises we're doing the day of the quiz, which in this case would be exercise 4, related to the microscope, and a handout in Blackboard related to the dissection of the rat, I could ask you a question on those exercises the day of the quiz so that I can see whether you have looked ahead and read ahead. It would be a very general type of question if I asked one. The vast majority of those 10 points for that first lab quiz are going to be over exercises 1 and 2. But I reserve the right to ask you a question or two the day of the quiz on the material that we'll be doing that day. And it'll be a procedural sort of question. So just look over those labs ahead of time. Don't have to memorize everything. But if I asked you a very basic question about what we were doing that day, you should be able to answer me. Now that next week on September 10th, notice we have our second lab quiz. That's going to be basically over the rat dissection and the care and use of the microscope that we did the preceding week. However, I could ask you a question or two about exercises 5, 6, and 7, which we're doing that day. Again, it would be a sort of a procedural. What are we doing? What materials are we manipulating? If you don't read those exercises before you come in to lab, you'll likely get that question or those questions wrong. So it's sort of my way of forcing you to look over the exercises before you come into lab. Now you might be wondering, well, okay, we've got a lecture quiz here on the 3rd, and we've got a lab quiz here on the 3rd. How are we going to do that? Well, as I said earlier, we're going to take the lab quiz at the beginning of lab. I'm going to let you take the lecture quiz when you're ready to leave lab. So some people may take it a little bit earlier than others, but you'll have an opportunity before you leave lab that day to take the lecture quiz. We will not take that as a group like we will the lab quiz. You can take that at your leisure, but it has to be done before you leave that day. On the 10th, we've got our second lab quiz, right? And we've got this chemistry exam, this 30-point multiple choice chemistry exam. Likewise, we'll take that quiz first, and I'll let you take the chemistry exam at your own leisure before you leave that Thursday. 30-point multiple choice. We'll talk more about that when we get closer. The following week on the 17th, we have our first lecture exam. We're also doing just one lab exercise. Now, my thinking is, I think you would rather get that lecture exam over with at the very beginning as opposed to waiting until after we've done exercise 8. So for the lecture exams that we're going to be doing in lab, we're going to take those at the beginning of lab, like we do the lab quizzes, just to get them out of the way. And then we will go on. If there are any lab exercises, we'll do that as a group after the exam, the lecture exam is over with. So I hope you're getting an idea of kind of how that's going to work. I know it's a little bit confusing at first, and we'll talk more about that on Thursday. If you have questions, or during a Zoom meeting, we can talk about this as well. But the bottom line is all of the exams and quizzes, be they lecture or lab, are going to be administered during lab time. Okay. So again, you can see the various topics we're doing week by week. You can see we're busy. Every week there's a quiz of some sort, isn't there? You see something green or something yellow highlighted, except for our first meeting on Thursday. So no rest for the weary. Again, got to put ample time into this and keep up. That's the key, keep up. Okay, so that pretty much completes the lab syllabus. What I want to do next is I want to go to the Blackboard course shell and talk a little bit about what's available in the lecture course shell. Remember I said earlier that you have both a lecture course shell and a lab course shell, and maybe if you sign up for the review, you have a review course shell. I'm not going to be putting anything in the review course shell, and I'm not going to be putting anything in the lab course shell. Everything you need for the course, lecture or lab, will be in the lecture course shell, and that's the 4749 CRN number. Okay, so I'm going to go to the course shell, which I have in front of me here, and I'm going to click on the student preview button, which is going to basically allow me to see what you see when you go to your course shell. My instructor course shell is a little bit different than yours. So here's what you're going to see when you pull up 47, 49, and a lot of you have probably already done that. And there should be an announcement here where I kind of say, welcome to Bio 2510. Here's the link that you can go to and should go to when we meet on Wednesday from 1:15 to 2:30 for our Zoom. This is also the link you'll use for the review if you're signed up for a review. This is also the link you're going to go to if you want to visit me during office hours. Okay, so all you got to do is click on that. You're going to want to have a camera, hopefully, on your PC. You could also use an iPad. You can use a phone, smartphone. All of this should recognize Zoom. You may need to download the app. I'm not exactly sure. I think for my phone, I downloaded the app. And the same for the iPad. But it should effortlessly take you right to the meeting room. And I have my own meeting room. Okay. And that worked really well last spring for my classes. So I'm hoping that it makes it easy for you just to click on that Zoom and then you'll be there. Okay. Here's the email option where if you want to email me, you can go to this. If you want to include others in the class, you can do that as well. I'll let you kind of play around through this. It's pretty self-explanatory, pretty intuitive. This other material down here you can check out if you want. I'm not going to really talk too much about it. I want to really talk more about the content folder here. So let's click on that. And there's a whole bunch of stuff here. Here's the master course syllabus. Here is the course syllabus that we just spent some time going over. This is more of a SUNY thing, where State University of New York wants all of this material kind of listed, all the learning objectives and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of administrative stuff in this master course syllabus, but this is the one that you're going to want to print off and have with you. Here's the Zoom meeting recordings that I will be posting. Let's just click on that really quick. Here's the one that I did, a couple hours ago. This is the first of the two Zooms that go over the course syllabus and the course and so forth. So I'll be adding number 2 of 2 when I'm done with this here in the Zoom meeting video recordings folder. So it works out really nice. This is basically a YouTube link. So that's kind of neat. All right, so that's the Zoom meetings. You can find them all here. And then we have a bunch of different things. We've got study objectives by chapter. These are things that I put together over the years. You remember earlier when I said we have this chemistry 2, chapter 2 chemistry test. And I told you you could go to a list of objectives to help guide you through that chapter as you prepare for the chemistry exam in a couple weeks. Well, that's this. Here's chapter 2, chemical basis of life. Of course, chapter 1 as well. And so I've put together some very broad questions, some broad objectives for all of the chapters in the entire course. And a lot of students tell me that they appreciate having these, that they use these to develop study guides for the quizzes and eventually the lecture exams. So you can use these as you would like. And again, they're here for all of the chapters. So that's the study objectives. Okay. Here are the PowerPoints. I have put a lot of effort, time, blood, sweat, and tears into all of the chapter PowerPoints that I'll be using, both in the Zoom recordings and also during our Zoom meetings on Wednesday. So make sure you're using these. Here are some lecture outlines. If you're interested in looking at these, we have several here. I'll just pull up the chemical basis of life for one real quick. And this is, again, sort of a guide that takes you through chapter 2 in this case. starting off with some general objectives, and then it gets into some details, some basic summaries, I guess, is really what it amounts to, of the chapter. So some students like to use these, others just don't use them very much. I'm not saying you necessarily need to use these, but they came with the book, so I'm providing them here for you as well. So those are the lecture outlines. Here are some student study outlines. They're somewhat similar to the chapter outlines. Let me just again go to chapter 2 real quick. What makes these maybe a little more usable, if you will, for students is the fact that a lot of these have fill-ins to test your knowledge of the material, or they're questions related to the information presented in the chapter. So if you want to make use of this to aid you in learning the material, it's here. Spend some time checking it out. And again, you may have noticed on Blackboard just a moment ago that if we go to, oops, sorry about that. If we go to this student outline and answers, there's an answer file for each exercise. So I just clicked on this one, but if we go to the chapter 2 answers and pull that up, it's going to have all the answers that would be found in those blanks, right? That presumably you would fill in. So you can check your answers by just looking at the answer sheet, basically. It's the same thing that we looked at earlier, but with the answers. So again, up to you whether you want to utilize that. This copy, or this file rather, really, really important stuff to copy and bring to lab each week. I mentioned earlier, when we went over the lab schedule, that there were some handouts that you would be expected to bring with you. I'm going to have to go in and populate this a little bit more. I was editing this earlier, but I will be listing all of the different exercises here before the end of the day for you to download. This is just a couple of them from last semester. I need to go in and check that. I didn't do that quite yet. So I'll mention this to you on Thursday. So that's my fault. I didn't have that filled out right now, but I will have all that stuff in there. What is of utmost importance for this week is to bring the exercise 1 and exercise 2 handouts, as well as I think 2 handouts related to how to write the lab report, and another document that talked about the lab report. There's 4, I think, to bring with you on Thursday, so please look at that. Here's guidelines to use when writing the research report. We talked about the extra credit research paper that you might want to consider. These are some other articles that I'll bring to your attention when we get to those topics in class. Here are some A&P videos that you can certainly check out if you're at all interested. This is a really, really good one that does a very nice job introducing the human body. In fact, I would have shown you this in lab the first day, but we're not going to be doing that this week. So I would encourage you to check that one out. And there's a whole bunch of other really interesting videos here. So check them out. And then finally, some websites that you can access to give you practice learning different aspects of anatomy and physiology. And this one here that I put here in yellow highlight is a super excellent YouTube channel that has a lot of videos that relate both to A&P1 and A&P2. So if you're stuck on a particular topic, whether it's cellular respiration or bones or muscle groups or how muscle contracts, I mean, there's just a ton of excellent topics that this individual's put some great videos together on. Don't forget to check this out. This is really, really good. Okay, so I think that sort of summarizes, in essence, what we've got going on in the course shell here in Blackboard. And if you have questions on any of this stuff, feel free to ask on Thursday when we get together for lab, or next week during our Wednesday Zoom session. Okay. Well, that kind of wraps up the second of our two videos. What I will likely do in the near future, probably within the next few days, is I will put together a voiceover PowerPoint on chapter 1. Because by the end of this week, if I check out the syllabus here, I think we have scheduled to get through chapter 1 and get into chapter 3 by the end of the first week of class. So, so look for another voiceover PowerPoint. This won't be a Zoom. It's going to be similar to Zoom, but it's going to be a PowerPoint that I'm going to narrate. And I'll probably give that a different designation, a different folder designation. So we'll be getting into chapter 1 very, very soon. I'll work on that in the next few days. And certainly we will talk about chapter 3 on Wednesday. I may also begin a voiceover PowerPoint for that as well. So we'll see how it goes. All right, I know you have lots of questions. I know this is going to be kind of new, the format, but be flexible. That's the best thing I can suggest. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And I look forward to seeing you guys on Thursday as we begin our journey through anatomy and physiology. See you then.